Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me.
I'm a 58-year-old contractor from Toledo, Ohio. I've been busting my back in construction since I was 19. And let me tell you, it's not the kind of work that gets you accolades. It's a life of sweat, muscle, and calloused hands. The kind of job people don't look twice at unless they need something built or fixed. Growing up, it was clear who the favorite was in our family. My brother David. Polished, Ivy League educated, MBA in hand, married into a rich family. He was the golden boy. And then there was me, the kid who worked on bikes in the backyard, scraping up enough for trade school. It never mattered to Dad. I opened my own remodeling company when I was 25. Everyone thought it was just a fallback, something to do until something real came along. I was fine with it. I didn't need their approval. I worked hard, built a reputation, and made something of myself. David, on the other hand, had it easy. He got a condo for his graduation. I got a set of used tools when I finished my apprenticeship. Everything I had, I worked for. But to Dad, it never felt like enough. David was always the star. He could do no wrong. Even at our family gatherings, it was always about David, what he was achieving, what he had. Everyone listened to him with wide eyes and deep respect. And there I was, always in the background. I didn't fit their idea of success. I remember when I started my business, I thought, this is it. This is finally something that will make them see me. I thought that stepping up would change things, make them realize I wasn't just the kid who could fix a leaky faucet or build a deck. I thought they'd finally acknowledge my worth. But it didn't. Not really. It was about 5 years ago that I realized it. I'd spent years working hard, helping when I could, doing what I thought was right. But then came the moment that really hit me. Even helping them out didn't buy respect. You know, you think after all these years, stepping up when the family needs you, they'll start to see you for who you are. But instead, they just see what they can get from you. And that was the real kicker. 3 years ago, I got a call from my parents that shook me to my core. They were about to lose the house. "Son," Mom said, her voice trembling, "we're in trouble. The bank's given us a deadline. If we don't pay by the end of the month, we're out." I knew things were tight for them, but I hadn't realized how bad it had gotten. They said David couldn't help, that his money was tied up in tuition, ski trips, and a new lake house. The usual excuses. David had always had his own way of getting by. For a long time, I figured he'd come through in a pinch, but that day, it was clear he wouldn't. And as much as I resented it, I knew I was the only one left. I had been saving up for months, building a small nest egg to expand my shop, maybe even buy the warehouse I was renting. I was so close to making a big move. But my parents needed me to be the one to step up. So I took the money I'd been saving, wired them $28,000, and had them sign a basic agreement. $700 a month. Nothing fancy. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, but I wasn't about to let them lose their home. For a while, things went okay. Dad even called me now and then, which, to be honest, was a change. I thought maybe things were finally changing. Maybe I'd earned some respect. But looking back, I should have known better. You think helping them out, giving them everything you've worked for, will shift things, just a little. Maybe, I thought, this time they'd start seeing me. Start seeing how much I sacrificed for them. But that was just wishful thinking. There was a time, just after I'd wired them the money, when I actually believed things might change. I thought maybe they'd start recognizing that I wasn't just the guy who fixed their leaky faucets or replaced their old appliances. Maybe I'd finally become more than the afterthought I'd always been in their eyes. For a while, it seemed like they understood. I remember Dad calling me, sounding almost grateful for once. But that feeling didn't last long. There was no thank you that stuck. No acknowledgement of what I had done beyond the bare minimum. It was as if they were more focused on keeping things comfortable than actually changing the dynamic that had existed for years. The one where I was always the one giving, and they were always the ones taking. They came through for a while, until the day I needed them to show up. That was the real twist. The day I realized that no matter how much I sacrificed, no matter how many times I stepped up, it wasn't going to be enough. I had hoped that paying their mortgage would mean more than just keeping the lights on. I had hoped it might at the very least make them see me as more than the guy who bails them out. But that didn't happen. Instead, I was left waiting. Waiting for the thanks, waiting for the recognition. It never came. I proposed to Amber last summer. We kept it simple, a backyard wedding on June 10th. Nothing big, just a barbecue, music, and our closest friends and family. No over-the-top nonsense, just a day to celebrate us. I sent the invites out 6 months ahead of time, including one to my parents, hoping they'd show up. I wanted them there, more than anything. I thought maybe now, after everything, they'd finally see the man I'd become. Maybe they'd finally make the effort to be a part of something that mattered to me. A week went by. No RSVP. So I called Dad. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey Dad, just wanted to check. You guys all set for June 10th? Amber and I are looking forward to having you there." I waited for the usual response, something like, "Can't wait," or "Wouldn't miss it." Instead, there was a long pause. "Son, we'll have to check our travel schedule." Travel schedule? What? I was stunned. "What do you mean?" "Well, we've got plans. David's taking the family to Maui the same week, so we're going to be there with him." I couldn't believe it. "Maui? Dad, that's the same weekend as my wedding." I let the silence hang there, hoping maybe he'd realize how ridiculous that sounded. He didn't. "Yeah, well, you know, David's got the lake house, and we've been planning this for a while. And you know, it's really not a high-profile event." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Not high profile?" I muttered, my voice barely above a whisper. "No, son," he said, his tone patronizing. "You build decks and she's a vet tech. It's not a high-profile event, it's not the kind of thing that fits in with the people we'll be around. It's a small deal for people at your level. At my level." My mind was racing, my stomach twisted into a knot. I wasn't even sure how to respond. "I see," I said, my voice steady but cold. "You can't make it because I don't fit into your idea of what's important." I heard him sigh, probably not understanding the weight of what he was saying. "It's not that, son. It's just, it's a small thing. You'll understand when you're older." I thought about hanging up on him. I really did. But instead, I simply ended the call with a weak, "All right, Dad." I didn't want to argue. I didn't want to fight. I just wanted to hear that they would be there. But I guess that was too much to ask. I spent the next few days in disbelief. How could they choose David's vacation over my wedding? I had sacrificed so much for them, helped them pay their bills, covered loans, picked up the slack, and this was the thanks I got. A week later, the wedding came and went, and of course, they weren't there. A month after, I got a text from Dad. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity got the best of me. "Son," he wrote, "we missed a couple deposits for the wedding. I thought you were going to help cover that." I couldn't believe it. My stomach churned. They didn't show up for my wedding, and now they were asking me to cover missed deposits for a party they weren't even part of. I sat there for a moment, staring at the screen, trying to make sense of it. But there was no sense to be made. They didn't see me as their son. They saw me as a bank, as someone who could be counted on to fix things when they broke. And when it came time for something that mattered to me, they didn't even show up. I didn't know how to respond at first, but I did know one thing. It wasn't just the missed wedding that hurt. It was everything before that. Every time I stepped up and did something for them, I'd been dismissed. Just like this. I took a deep breath and put the phone down. That was the moment I knew I couldn't go back. It wasn't about money anymore. It wasn't about fixing things. It was about them never seeing me as their son. And that hurt more than any insult they could throw my way. A month after the wedding, just when I thought I might finally start moving forward, the phone rang again. It was Dad. I didn't expect the conversation to be any different than the others, but what he said next made my blood boil. "Son, why haven't we seen any deposits this month?" he asked, his tone calm as if nothing had happened. I almost dropped the phone. What do you mean? We agreed on $700 a month. You've been sending it without fail. We signed an agreement. I know, but... He paused, like he was thinking hard about how to phrase his next words. You were helping us out because we were struggling, right? So why the sudden change? Why stop now? I was already getting upset. Dad, it's not a change. We agreed on terms. You signed the papers. $700 a month until the loan is repaid. He scoffed. Only a greedy person keeps track of family debts. That hit like a slap in the face. My hand shook as I gripped the phone. Greedy? Are you kidding me? You think I'm doing this for fun? I'm trying to help you keep your home. Dad didn't respond right away. He let the silence stretch, and when he finally spoke again, his voice had taken on a strange edge. You know, David's business is in trouble. He needs help. His company is losing money. Maybe you should do your part. My head was spinning. What do you mean, do my part? I've done more than my part already. I gave you $28,000, and now you're acting like it's just a loan from some stranger. Well, he said, his voice now softer, almost pleading, it's a family thing, son. You should help him out. He's struggling. We're all family. My heart pounded in my chest. I'm already doing my part. Why does David always get a free pass? He's the one who gets the family's support because he's got that fancy business degree and all those connections, right? And what do I get? Nothing but demands. I could feel the anger rising in my throat. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about how they saw me, how they always saw me, as the one who didn't matter unless it was to fix things, to clean up their mess. You know, Dad said, as if he hadn't heard a word I'd said, you're being selfish. You've got the money, so why not share it? Help David out like you helped us. The last bit of patience I had snapped. I'm done, I muttered, more to myself than to him. But before I could hang up, I heard a strange noise. Dad had set the phone down without realizing it, and I could hear muffled voices in the background. I hadn't expected to hear what I did next. David didn't know about the loan. Mom's voice came through, faint but clear. He doesn't know he borrowed money from him. My heart stopped. The truth hit me like a freight train. What the hell did you just say? I whispered, barely able to breathe. I pressed the phone to my ear. What do you mean David didn't know? It's just... We didn't want him to know, Mom said, her voice cracking. He's been dealing with enough already. I could feel the rage building in my chest. I had been played. My parents had taken my money and lied to me, all while making me feel like I was the problem, the one who couldn't understand what family was all about. The phone shook in my hand. I'm done with this, I said through gritted teeth, hanging up before they could say anything else. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to stay quiet. Not this time. They had lied to me, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it anymore. After that conversation with Dad, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being played, the lies, the excuses, and the casual disregard for everything I'd done for them. It was too much. I spent days trying to cool off, thinking maybe I was just reacting out of frustration. But then I realized they weren't going to change. They hadn't seen me for who I was, for what I had built, for the sacrifices I made. They saw me as a source, someone who could be used when they needed something. That was the breaking point. I called a lawyer. I showed her the paperwork, the agreement I had with my parents, the wire transfer receipts, the text messages. She looked it over, took a deep breath, and looked at me with a steady gaze. They've got no case, she said after a long pause. You've got them cold. I remember feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. For years, I'd been trying to be the bigger person, trying to keep things together. But now I had a lawyer telling me that I was in the right. I wasn't being unreasonable. I wasn't being selfish. I had done everything I could, and they had crossed a line. We sent a demand letter, full repayment, or I'd take them to court. It wasn't something I wanted to do, but at that point, I was done being their doormat. The response came quickly. My phone buzzed nonstop. Text after text from extended family members, cousins I hadn't heard from in years. Messages like, "Why are you doing this?" and "You're hurting the family." One message that really caught me off guard was from Grace, David's wife. "You're hurting the children," she texted, as if I was the villain here. I hadn't seen her kids since they were in diapers, and now I was hurting them by asking for what was mine. I almost laughed, but the reality hit me. All of them, including David, had been complicit in this, and now they were trying to turn it around on me. But what really surprised me was David. I expected him to back his parents, to ignore the reality of what had happened, just like everyone else always did. But when the demand letter hit, David didn't stay silent. I got a call from him one evening. "I didn't know, you know," David said, sounding almost apologetic. "I didn't know they borrowed money from you." I stayed quiet for a second, processing what he'd said. "You didn't know? They told you it was from a bank loan, didn't they?" "Yeah," David replied. "I always thought it was a loan from the bank. They never told me you gave them the money." I could hear the tension in his voice, the realization hitting him. And for the first time I saw him, really saw him. He wasn't just my polished Ivy League brother. He was someone who had been lied to, just like I had. "They lied to both of us," I said, a little softer now. David was silent for a moment, processing. Then his voice grew firmer. "That's messed up, man. You should have told me." "I tried," I said quietly. "But you were always too busy, and they always had a way of making me feel like I was overreacting." David let out a frustrated sigh. "I'm going to talk to them. This isn't right." It was the first time in my life I felt like David actually had my back. It felt strange, but in that moment, I knew things were shifting. Maybe for the first time, he wasn't just the golden brother. He was seeing the truth for what it was. A few days later, I received a message from David. "We'll fix this. I'll talk to them. They've got to pay you back." The words were simple, but they meant everything. David had finally turned on our parents, and it was because of the truth I had finally forced to the surface. The air in the restaurant was heavy as I sat across from my parents, my hands folded neatly on the table. I had no intention of making small talk. This wasn't going to be a casual conversation. This was about business, cold and clear. Amber sat next to me, her presence a quiet but firm reminder that I wasn't in this alone. I had her support, and that meant everything to me. On the other side of the table, my parents looked uncomfortable. Mom fidgeted with her napkin while Dad stared at the menu like it was the most interesting thing in the room. David and Grace sat stiffly beside them, their expressions tight, as if they knew what was coming, but hadn't quite figured out how to handle it. Grace, as always, looked like she was just waiting for the moment to play the peacemaker. But the tension was thick enough that even she wasn't sure where to start. I took a breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle into my chest. "I asked you both to sit down so we could clear the air. We need to talk about the money I lent you. The $28,000. The loan I gave you to keep your house." I laid out the paperwork carefully, making sure it was all visible. The wire transfers, the signed agreement. Each page was like a stone, heavy and final. Mom's eyes flickered to the papers, then quickly darted away. She wouldn't look me in the eye. Dad, on the other hand, stayed quiet, pretending to read the menu as though he wasn't fully aware of what this meeting was about. I didn't give them time to speak. "This wasn't a gift," I continued. "I want you to understand that. You signed an agreement to pay me back, and you've done nothing but ignore it." Mom shifted in her chair, clearly uncomfortable, but I didn't care anymore. "We've done a lot for this family, and I've asked for one thing: respect. A simple acknowledgement that what I've done, the money I've given, the sacrifices I've made, actually means something." The silence that followed felt suffocating. No one spoke. Not until David broke it. "Wait," he said, his voice sharp and filled with disbelief. "You lent them that much?" I could feel the room shift. His words cut through the tension like a knife. For a second, it felt like time stood still. "Yeah," I said, trying to steady my breath. "I lent them that much. You told me it came from a bank loan." David looked back at our parents, his brow furrowed. "You used his money to bail me out?" I could see the shock in his eyes. the confusion. He hadn't known. He had no idea that my parents had lied to him, too. "I didn't know," David said quietly, turning back to face me. His voice, though calm, carried the weight of something he hadn't considered before. Grace shifted next to him, clearly uncomfortable, but it wasn't her time to speak. Not now, not with the truth laid out before us. "We didn't think it was necessary to tell you," Mom murmured, but her words felt weak. "We thought it would be better this way." David looked at them, his face flushed with frustration. "This way? Are you kidding me? You used his money without telling me. You lied to me, and you lied to him." It was the first time I had heard David speak with real authority. The first time I saw him not just back down or smooth things over. It hit me like a revelation. My brother wasn't the same person he had been before. "You lied to us both," I said, my voice unwavering. "And now you want me to just keep helping? To keep covering for you? It ends here." Mom and Dad exchanged a glance. They didn't deny it, not outright. Instead, they tried to change the subject. "Look, can we just move past this?" Dad asked, his voice soft, desperate. "It's been a rough year for all of us." "No," I replied firmly. "It's not that simple." David's gaze didn't waver as he turned back to them. "I can't believe you did this." The tension was unbearable, and for a second, I thought they might try to talk their way out of it again. But this time, with David finally seeing the truth, they didn't have a leg to stand on. They couldn't gaslight me anymore. Not with him here, not with the paperwork staring them in the face. "Look," I said, letting the silence settle. "You're going to repay me, or we'll be in court. No more excuses." I didn't care if they were uncomfortable. I didn't care if they were angry. I had earned the right to say it, and for the first time it felt like I wasn't fighting alone. It felt like David finally saw me, saw what I had done, and didn't just brush it aside like he always had. "You're going to repay him," David said, his voice steady now, and I could feel a weight lifting off me. For once, I wasn't the only one carrying the burden. The silence between my parents and me was deafening. After the meeting, after the legal threats, after the coldness from my side, I thought maybe that would be it. I had expected some relief, the quiet satisfaction of knowing they'd finally agreed to repay the loan. But the truth is, the hardest part wasn't that. It was the aftermath. The part where you begin to move on, where you stop being angry and just start living with the decision you made. And that's exactly what I did. Payments resumed. At least they stuck to that agreement. But all communication with my parents went through the lawyer now. Everything was official, clean, and cold. There were no more phone calls, no more half-baked guilt trips or promises that things would change. I was done trying to fix things that weren't broken. I'd done enough. David, though, started texting me. And at first, I wasn't sure what to make of it. I'd expected him to just slide back into his comfortable spot, to return to the life of casual family drama he had always known. But instead, he started reaching out. It wasn't frequent, but there was something different about his tone. He asked about work, asked how my shop was going, even asked if I was looking at houses. He sent me a picture of his kids once, just them playing in the yard. Simple things, but it meant more than I could explain. Amber and I had started looking for a house ourselves. We'd been through enough. Both of us had. A fresh start felt right. We found a quiet street just outside Ann Arbor, a place with a yard big enough for a future dog, if we ever decided we were ready for that kind of thing. It felt like we were finally building something on our terms, something real, something that was ours. We decided to put some of the repayment funds into something that felt meaningful, a scholarship for kids who were like me, high school seniors who were interested in trades, the kind of kids who didn't fit the mold of a four-year college but had skills, ambition, and the potential to build something real. I wanted to give them the opportunities I never had, or at least the ones I had to fight for. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. But then, a couple of weeks later, something unexpected happened. I was at the shop when I got a letter from my mom. She had never been one to write letters, so I knew this had to be something important. I opened it slowly, unsure of what to expect. It wasn't an apology in the way I thought it would be. It wasn't a heartfelt, tearful plea for forgiveness, but it was something. The letter said, "I'm sorry for how things were handled, for the way we've treated you." That was it. No deeper reflection, no real ownership. But I guess I'd been expecting too much. The letter didn't ask for anything, which was new. Usually there was some hidden request buried in the fine print, but this time it was just an acknowledgement. The bare minimum. I put the letter down and exhaled. It wasn't the closure I thought I'd need, but I guess it was enough. At least they weren't demanding anything from me anymore. At least they understood, if just for a moment, that I wasn't going to be the person they could take advantage of anymore. David called a few days after that, and this time there was something different in his voice. "I spoke to Mom," he said, and I could hear the strain in his words. "She's trying, I guess. I know she screwed up, but I think she's realizing that things can't go back to the way they were." I didn't know how to respond to that. Part of me still felt like I should be angry, like I should hold on to the years of hurt and neglect. But another part of me realized that if I was going to move on, if I was going to finally stop carrying the weight of all the years they had taken advantage of me, I couldn't keep holding on to that anger. "I don't expect anything from them," I said slowly. "I've already gotten what I needed." There was silence on the other end of the line, and then David spoke again, quieter this time. "I'm trying to be better. To be more like you, you know?" I laughed. "I didn't say I was a good example," I joked. But there was something about David saying that hit me harder than I expected. "I think you are," he said. And for the first time, I realized something. He might have always been the one with the polished resume, the Ivy League degree, the perfect life. But somewhere along the way, maybe I had earned my own place in this family, not for the things I could give, but for the things I had built, the things I had done for myself, with my own hands, with my own hard work. It wasn't about them seeing my worth anymore. It was about me seeing it. It's strange, but there's a part of me that almost expected the apology to feel more profound. I got a letter from my mom a couple of weeks after everything had quieted down. It was long, but not in the way you might hope. It wasn't full of remorse or deep reflection, but there was a line or two acknowledging how things had been handled. Not really an apology, not in the way I'd wanted, but it was there. "I'm sorry for how things were handled," the letter said. "I never intended for it to go this far. We should have done better by you." But there were no words like "I was wrong" or "I see what you did for us." Just vague statements, a formality. The type of apology that doesn't ask for forgiveness but hopes it's granted anyway. It didn't make me feel as much as I thought it would. I wasn't angry, but I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of letting them think that letter was enough. Amber read it too. When I looked at her afterward, she gave me a soft smile, but I could see the concern still lingering in her eyes. She knew the situation wasn't as simple as some words on a page. It wasn't just about an apology. It was about the years of neglect, the constant undermining, the feeling of being invisible. But we couldn't pretend that things were the same. Amber and I were finally starting a new chapter in our lives, and we weren't going to let them pull us back into their world of drama. Still, after everything, I knew that there had to be some resolution. I couldn't keep running away from them entirely, nor did I want to. I wasn't looking for their approval, but I had to admit, it felt important to have some kind of closure. So, we decided to meet them at our house. I laid out the boundaries. No overnight visits, strictly a casual afternoon. And they were fine with that. A bit awkward, but polite. Dad smiled more than I expected, almost as though he was trying to make up for the silence that had existed between us for so long. David, too, had started to change a little. He was still David, the polished one with the MBA and the lake house. But he wasn't the same distant figure he used to be. There was an attempt at connection, at being less showy, more grounded. He told me once, with a hint of humility I hadn't seen before, that he wanted his kids to see real work up close, something more substantial than his own polished corporate life. I invited them to tour the shop, the place I built with my own hands, the space I had spent years making into something that felt like home. When we got there, I could tell they were impressed. They walked through the rows of tools, the workbenches, the half-finished projects I'd been tinkering with. "Wow," Dad said, looking around. "You built all this?" "Yeah," I said, trying to keep the smile off my face. "All without a trust fund." There was a pause. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in what felt like years, and then he nodded. It wasn't a huge acknowledgement, but it was something. For once, he was seeing me as more than just the guy who fixed things, more than just the spare son. David, standing off to the side with Grace, exchanged a look with her. He seemed deep in thought. I could see that in some small way, he was finally grasping what I had built, what I had achieved on my own terms. They didn't say much after that. There were no grand declarations of respect or admiration. It was just a quiet moment, a turning point. Maybe they weren't ready to admit it fully, but for the first time, I didn't need them to. I wasn't looking for their approval anymore. I had found my own worth.
YouTube picked this for you. Tap it. Let's see if they guessed right.